My name is Ashley Hoffman, and I'm doing a case study on violent incidences within EMS and how they can be prevented. In our scenario we were given, our local fire and EMS crews went into an unsafe scene with law enforcement not present. A firefighter got hurt pretty badly, as well as some bystanders. Equipment was stolen, drug boxes were taken, and apparently the firefighter that was injured, his father-in-law was the mayor, and the mayor called out a concern as to how I, as the chief, would handle this. So I'm comparing this to a case study. In Wisconsin, a career firefighter was killed and a police officer and a civilian were wounded. They were dispatched for a patient that initially was a seizure but ended up being an overdose. Law enforcement did respond, not out of request by dispatch, but they just happened to be in the area and see how they could help. Upon giving that patient Narcan, he woke up and was adamant he didn't need any further care. Law enforcement, fire, and EMS all tried to convince him to go. They had him exit the bus and try to make their way towards the ambulance, and the law enforcement asked if he had any weapons or anything that would harm the EMS crew. And after he wasn't really being compliant, the conversation became elevated, and the next thing you knew, a gun was pulled on the first responders. Police immediately returned fire and sought cover. One firefighter was shot within 3 seconds of the gun being drawn and collapsed while seeking cover. He was found 80 seconds later unresponsive, and they tried treating him at the scene, transported him to the hospital where he was later pronounced dead. An officer was also shot in the return fire. The shooter in this time took a civilian bystander, made them a hostage, and during the firing exchange, the hostage was also shot. Finally, the shooter was shot as well. They immediately rendered care. They then took him to the hospital where he was also pronounced dead. When looking back at the incident report itself, the first shot was fired 39 minutes after initial contact with the patient and 22 minutes after exiting the bus. So when I look at these situations, some similarities I see. The main thing is first responders did not maintain a secure scene due to their lax practices, in my opinion. I think everybody gets comfortable. They don't want to wait around. They just want to get the call done. And unfortunately, in these situations, it was a loss of life and severe injury that took place. While law enforcement was on scene, upon reviving the patient, law enforcement should have been more involved in checking the patient for weapons prior to him leaving that bus. At least if they had done a better job at making sure that he wasn't armed, at least it would have been contained to a bus and maybe less people would have been injured. When we look at standard operating procedures, I reviewed back to Phoenix's standard operating procedures. And in their standard operating procedures, fire and EMS should never enter a hot zone or put themselves in a predicament where they would be in a hot zone. Especially if law enforcement's already there and operating actively. Fire and EMS should maintain either in a warm zone or even a cold zone, depending on the plan that law enforcement wants to set forth. Really, they're in control and dictate when things are safe enough for fire and EMS to intervene. If they want to take an offensive approach, that could be entering a warm zone. But again, under law enforcement's guidance, we certainly don't want to hinder their operations, create more patients than what they already have to deal with as they're trying to neutralize a threat. If we take a defensive approach, that's where we would operate in a cold zone. That means we stay as far back as we can, stay out of the way, and we wait for law enforcement to give the all clear. And they've deemed it safe. The defensive strategy, I think, is more used in prolonged violent events. In this case, we also prevent from being a hindrance in their efforts. So my expectations from company level officers and battalion commanders, I want to ensure that they're collaborating with law enforcement making sure that, we're not hindering their operations. We're supporting them in any manners in which we can, while obviously trying to save and protect as many lives as possible. With this being said, this takes constant collaboration. I would want my team to work constantly with local law enforcement so that we're properly prepared for these incidences. And the same goes for my staff. I think something that needs to be addressed is the fact that regardless of if we think we can or can't handle something, that we need to be cognizant that things can change very quickly and go downhill, and we aren't prepared. We don't have weapons to protect ourselves, so we need to steer clear. And while I know the sense of urgency is there to take care of people in a time of need and something scary like that, we need to sit back and make sure that we're doing everything we can to remain safe. If we, in turn, get hurt, then we're no good to the people that we were trying to save. And then we've also caused more issues for law enforcement to neutralize the threat and do what they need to do.